Okay, great. All right, so welcome back, everybody. This is week 4, right? Wow. Okay. Yeah. So HACC started earlier than any of my other classes that because I teach at 2 other universities, and yeah, so we're moving along pretty quickly here, which is awesome. That means we're going to get to the end of the semester earlier too, right? Which will be great because you'll be done, and all the other schools I think are going to be still going on. All right. So with our topic this week is going to be consciousness and unconscious and subconscious. You're going to hear a lot of these terms again thrown throughout the rest of the semester, especially when we get into personality and defense mechanisms and memory, which I think is next week, right? And learning. And even when we get into therapy too, because of hypnosis, right? That's an altered state. So what is consciousness? What are some definitions, maybe from the reading or your own personal experience?
I know at times conscious has to do with sleep, and like maybe like being aware of your surroundings.
Okay. Let me share. Let's make a ongoing list here. Actually, oh, bear with me here. I am also having technology difficulties here. All right. There we go. All right. So, consciousness. What is happening here? Consciousness. All right. So, you said it has to do with sleep. Okay. Any other definitions or ideas of what consciousness is?
Awareness or
awareness
or perception of something.
Okay, awareness. Okay, awareness and perception, right? Because we learned in our last chapter that perception is our mental process of sensations we're taking in, right? So absolutely, right? What about altered states of consciousness? What do we know about that? What have we heard about that?
Excuse me, what we heard about what?
What's that?
You said what we heard about what?
Yeah, what are
the
altered? Yeah, what are altered states of consciousness? Like what can put us in altered states?
Like drugs, meditation.
Okay.
Trauma.
Meditation. Trauma. What do you mean by trauma?
Well, I think it means like you're changing a person's like mental state. So it's like their response to something that happened like traumatic to them.
Okay. So we'll kind of touch upon that. We don't, if you really want to get into this stuff, abnormal psychology is really, really good because it goes into what we call dissociation. And dissociation is a separation from reality, and in some conditions, even alertness. So some people might act and not even be aware of that. And there's a lot of controversy with that too. But anyway, that's really an abnormal psychology. We do talk about it briefly in this class, but we're not going to go too much in the weeds of it. So in general, we look at consciousness as an awareness of everything that's going on around us. And a couple of you have talked about either sleep versus alertness or awareness of what's going on around you with perception. So we differentiate between 2 states of consciousness: waking, which we kind of talked about here, and altered states. Okay, so waking is when we are aware of our surroundings. We're constantly we have our thoughts and feelings in the forefront of our minds, right? And this kind of relates to when we get into mindfulness. We'll talk a little bit about mindfulness. But I always look at this, and if you want to kind of just carry this with you throughout the semester, as how we are with, how many of you watch like the news, MSNBC or CNN or Fox or something like that? How many of you, maybe by show of hands, do you watch? I don't have a lot of videos on today. But when we're watching those videos, we have the picture, we have the announcer or somebody up there talking about the news, right? And then what do we have at the bottom, scrolling across the bottom?
Like the headlines of other stories.
Lines.
Right. It's kind of like a news ticker, right? So I always liken this. I love analogies, by the way, in case you haven't picked up on this. But I always look at it analogous to the what we are thinking about actively and doing is up on that big screen, right? That's the news announcer, because we're paying attention to what we're seeing and what we're hearing. And then at the bottom is our stream of thoughts. These are things that we can't really slow down. We can't really alter. We can't really do anything with. They're just there. And that's kind of what we're talking about with like our subconscious, like our stream of thoughts that just happen. So our awake is up on the screen, and our subconscious or unconscious is that ticker that's going across the bottom. Now, when we talk about mindfulness training and helping people with we don't necessarily control that stream that's going on the bottom, but we don't let it really affect us. Okay. So what do I mean by that? So maybe many of you have had a thought or a song stuck in your head, right? Something that's just constantly there. And for some people that aren't used to that, that might be bothering to them. That might be something that they constantly revert to and they're going back to, and it's affecting their daily routine. So any kind of thoughts like persevering thoughts or fixations, maybe you've been up late at night and you just can't get something out of your head for the next day or that week or something that happened to you that day. Those are those streaming thoughts. And what mindfulness is just connecting us, saying those thoughts are there. I'm not going to let them control me. We kind of take those powers away. So anyway, just kind of jump ahead to what we'll talk about when we get into therapy, but keep that in mind as we're going through just these two different states of existence with waking and altered states, right? So when we talk about waking, we're looking at waking versus sleep, okay? So we know that waking, let me get rid of that. We know that waking, there we go. We know that waking is when we're alert, we're around, we're paying attention to things. But what does it mean when we're sleeping? What is sleep? What is the purpose of sleep? How many of you sleep, by the way? Show of hands. Hopefully everybody in the room. So why do we sleep? What's the purpose of it?
Well, sleep allows like your body like the rest like that it needs and the energy, and like it also says sleep helps your brain.
Okay. All right. So two things that we look at with sleep, maybe so for our physiological, right? Physiological, and also psychological. Okay, so two reasons that we need to sleep is to restore our muscles and our endorphins and our neurotransmitters, right? All these things that work together to get us active and get us moving around during the day and perform daily functioning. So this is physical function. Now, psychological function. Why would sleep be important for psychological functioning?
Helps form new neural pathways for memory.
Okay, absolutely. So helps with memory, helps with alertness, right? Because how many of you have maybe not gotten a good night's sleep and then you're up the next day and you're not able to really pay attention to things, right? Or focus on what's on the task that you have at hand, maybe at work or school or whatever. So there are several reasons for psychological sleep helping us psychologically, and one of those is to kind of restore those neurotransmitters, so that we're able to remember things and learn and be alert and recall. Okay, so all these things help are restored through our sleep patterns. Okay,
Yeah. But sometimes falling asleep is not all that easy.
okay. Why is that?
Well, because like everybody has different techniques. Like some people can easily fall asleep, some people can't, and I think it also somewhat depends on the kind of mood you're in, like around the time you go to bed. And like say like depending on something that you ate, like if you ate like or drank, like if you drank some water shortly before bedtime, and that, but let's say this, but instead you had a bottle of soda.
Okay.
Right before bed, and like, you know, like soda can make you like hyper and be like.
So likewise, we talked about maybe drugs that interfere with our ability. I'm sorry, that help us to sleep, but there are also chemicals that keep us from sleeping, right? And we'll talk about those probably. I don't think we're going to have time today to get to them, but by Wednesday, we'll talk about some sleep disorders, issues that people have with sleep. But going into that, I want you to be aware of a couple of words. First one is our circadian rhythm or circadian cycle. Oops. Or cycle. Okay. So what this cycle is, it's a clock, a biological clock that we all possess, and it's very necessary for survival for us to sleep at certain points of the day within a 24-hour period. Now, the reason that this circadian cycle puts us to sleep and gets us drowsy is in an area of the brain, I think that we talked about it 2 weeks ago, the hypothalamus, which is responsible for activating our glands that paralyze our body and put us into deeper and deeper sleep. Okay, so what would you say? Are we as humans, are we nocturnal, or do we sleep more during the day?
Nocturnal.
Nocturnal. Okay. Right. How many of you would consider yourselves nocturnal? Show of hands.
Speaking for myself.
Right. All right.
I'm mixed.
So
I'm mixed. Sometimes I'll be active during the day and sometimes I'll be active during the night.
So our survival really came from roaming around and hunting and gathering during the day, right? Because our eyes, our ears, our bodies are not designed to function optimally at night. And we know that because we see colors, right? Now, conversely, if you examine the anatomy of a cat or an owl or something, they have more rods in their eyes than they do cones. So they don't see color nearly as well, but they can see it at night a lot better. We don't. We don't see at night very well at all, as a matter of fact. We can adjust and see a little bit, but when it comes to us versus a nocturnal predator, we would lose every time because we don't have that awareness. We're not built for seeing during the day or seeing during the night. So anyway, as a species, we are not nocturnal animals. We thrive better during the day, and the evidence is just with our senses. So that circadian rhythm helps us sleep at night because we don't hunt and gather during the day. Okay, and that's kind of where that came from. Now, certain things can trigger our circadian rhythm. All right, our drowsiness. What sort of things trigger us to feel drowsy and fall asleep? What are some of your triggers?
Like personally,
Yeah, what helps you go to sleep at night?
Counting
I
sheep.
play Animal Crossing.
You play what?
Animal Crossing.
Okay. So counting sheep Animal Crossing, maybe reading.
Reading.
Read a
Um,
book.
Okay, so I'm going to put mundane tasks. Okay, so these are tasks that are just really repetitive, right? But these are things that you've introduced into your lives to kind of spawn you to relax a little bit more. Okay. What else? What are some other triggers you might have that tells your body it's time to go to bed?
I take CBD to help me go to bed.
Okay. So medication might, some people might need medication. Think natural. Think things in your environment that happen.
Crickets.
Okay, crickets. All right. Sounds of nighttime, of the night, right? Or maybe an absence of traffic or people walking around. What are some other things in your environment that might trigger you to feel drowsy?
Rain.
Okay. If it rains at night for some environments, okay, we'll put that as sounds of night. What else?
Turning off the lights.
Okay, darkness, right? What in nature tells us it's time to sleep?
Darkness.
The sun going down, right? The darkness. Absolutely. Because when it gets dark, we don't operate optimally, right? Our eyes don't. It takes more energy for us to do simple tasks at night. So we tend to shut down, and your circadian rhythm or circadian cycle, in conjunction with your hypothalamus, starts releasing hormones that slows your heart. It raises your temperature. It gets your mind to shut down and prepares you for sleep. Okay. Now, I got a cool little graphic here I picked up from your book. Within the sphere of sleep, we have what's called REM sleep, or rapid eye movement, and non-REM sleep, which is non-rapid eye movement sleep. Okay. You'll hear me refer to this a couple times throughout today and Wednesday. Outside of here, probably not too much. But it's really important to understand what REM versus non-REM sleep is, because we require a lot of it, if you see, in the beginning. And just about 50%, so these are ages, by the way. So this is birth to 2 years old between here, okay? And any of you that have observed kids or have kids of your own or have been around little ones, you probably know they sleep a lot, don't they? So sometimes anywhere from 12 to 14 to even 16 hours a day is usually a healthy range for children to sleep. Now, what's happening is they're getting about 6 to 8 hours of non-REM sleep, but REM sleep, this is where your mind is actually very, very active. And a lot of people get that wrong. A lot of students think that REM means your mind is the least active. It's actually the most active. In fact, it's probably as active, if not more active, than when you're awake. How can that be? How can our minds be so active when we're not up and about and moving and doing things? And that's because we talked about neurotransmitters and GABA. GABA being introduced into the system helps to release certain chemicals that paralyze our body. We're physically paralyzed from the hair down, with the exception of our eyes, weirdly enough. But when we are paralyzed, our mind becomes awake and starts processing through whatever emotions you dealt with that day, any unresolved conflict, any thoughts, anything that might have frightened you, which would explain certain nightmares with PTSD, right? So anything that we have, that we try and process during that day, and remember, we are two things as humans. What are they?
Lazy.
And prideful.
Prideful and lazy.
Prideful.
Good. I heard two of those things, right? And of course, lazy, I jokingly use because we like to have things easy. This is where we start making sense of our world. When we're thinking about it, we're putting it into nice little packages in our mind. So that way we have routines and we can make sense of it. Okay. So let's say, for example, when we get into dreams, we'll talk more about this. You, as a person, you're out and you see maybe an accident on the road that really, really frightens you, okay? And for some of you, maybe you've seen a lot of accidents, but for somebody that hasn't, that might be a very frightening experience for you. You see something happen to somebody else that's very frightening for you. So at night, you know, you may have, you may try and think about it all day, or you may be able to push it out of your mind. But at night, usually, this is where your short-term memory starts logging things, cataloging things, and putting it into your long-term memory. And the only way, and keep in mind, we talked about our minds not being like videotapes or hard drives, right? We don't think in terms of pictures. We think in terms of emotions and symbols. So we package all those symbols and emotions up into nice little packages, and we put them in our long-term memory for storage. But if they don't make sense to us or they frighten us, then we tend to review and review and review, and that makes our experience with dreams a little bit more vivid. Does that make sense? So at a young age, that happens a lot. Why? Why from birth till 2 do you think so much REM sleep is needed?
Oh, mental development.
Well, what is a child's brain doing? Remember, there's 200 billion neurons that are existing in there and trying to form neural pathways. That's a pretty big task from birth until 2, isn't it? So their brains are forming. They're learning the world around them. They're learning languages. They're learning sounds. They're learning how to move their bodies. All of these things need to be packaged up neatly so they know how to do it the next day. And that's the reason why they need so much REM sleep in the very beginning. So as we get a little bit older, as you can see, our need for REM sleep declines significantly. So right about 10 to 20 years old in adolescence here, teens to adolescence, is where we really don't need so much REM sleep, or at least we're not getting it. These are based on people that actually get REM sleep versus non-REM sleep, and I'll show you how we kind of detect that. So, you know, maybe this is environmental. Maybe as a society, we don't sleep as much. Who knows? But we do know that this is the trend that seems to be occurring with humans. And as you can see, you know, right about 10 to 20 years old, non-REM sleep caps off about 8 hours, right? So right about here, you know, we're looking at 8 to 9 hours is probably a good amount of sleep for teens and adolescents. And then we see a sharp drop off here. You know, I probably get a lot less. I'm probably in this range here and get a lot less sleep than I need to. But as you can see, I'm not very far off my mark. Okay. So anyway, just a little picture for you to really kind of grasp what we need as far as sleep versus awake states. Okay. Any questions or comments on that before we move on? All right. All right, so let's look at the stages of sleep, because the stages of sleep are very important when we're looking at what kind of sleep and what quality of sleep we're getting at, okay? So your book goes into a lot of details as far as energy waves, like beta waves, right? I think talked about alpha waves. I think I should have probably put alpha waves first, right? For going according to the Greek alphabet. Theta waves and delta waves. Okay, so all these really describe. So when we look at observing somebody sleeping, we can put detectors on somebody's brain, on somebody's scalp, and we can detect the amount of waves, electronic pulses that are going through their brains. And that's what these describe. These are just different wavelengths that occur at different stages. And it really gives us an indication of what stage the person's sleeping in. Okay, so for example, beta waves are more prevalent when we're awake. We see these. These are the waves that, actually, I think I may have, yep, I do. Okay. I do have a, yep. So beta waves, you're gonna see more when we're awake. And these are just little, sharp little pulses, as you can see here. Can everybody see my slide all right?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. When we get into alpha waves, so right before some of you were talking about getting into some games or counting sheep. When we get into a little bit more of a relaxed state, we're going to see the amplitude increase a little bit through here, okay? We're going to see a little higher, more defined sine waves occur. And that indicates that our mind is starting, our hypothalamus is starting to release some chemicals throughout our body that's going to raise temperature and slow heart rate and get us into that state of relaxation. Our muscles start relaxing in some cases, right? So then we go into what's called stage 1 sleep. Now, many of you can probably relate to this. How many of you have maybe just, I think one of you had talked about counting sheep. What happens when you count sheep? Where does your mind go when you start counting sheep or playing your game and your mind starts drifting off? What sort of thoughts do you have? Is there anything in particular that you have, or is it just more randomized? Anybody care to share? Nobody?
I feel like it's more randomized.
Okay, all right. And it could be you maybe hear something or think you see something, right? Because your mind is kind of slowing down. It's slowed down, and now we see more of a randomized pattern here. You see it? Some areas it's high, some areas it really dips down, but there's really no strict pattern. Like we had beta waves, which was just kind of more of a flat line jumping around, and then we have alpha waves, which are more defined sine waves with bigger amplitude. It's all over the place with theta waves, okay? And that's because our mind is starting to slow down. It's starting to kick in with some thoughts, and then it starts relaxing again, and it's just really all over. And then when we get to stage 2, we'll see more spindles of theta waves. So they become more defined, and you can see how random it is. We have some activity here, and then it kind of just lulls. Then we have some more activity here, and then we have some jumping around all over here too. So that's N2, a little bit deeper sleep stage. And then we get to our deep sleep, or our non-REM deep sleep, okay? You see the amplitude here with activity is just much more greater, okay? That's our body at total relaxation, where our mind, we're not experiencing a lot of mind activity, but as you can see, it still jumps around a little bit, but for the most part, the amplitude is just consistently high throughout. And then we get to REM sleep. REM sleep, again, most represents beta waves, as you can see in this nice long stretch here. Of course, probably have some jumping around here. This could be really anything within our environment that might be, our mind might be trying to get back into non-REM sleep, but for the most part, we have a constant stream of thoughts going here. Our mind is most active, right? So those are your 5 stages. 4 stages with your awake. Any questions on that? Does this make sense?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Excuse me. And it is worth noting, and I think I did share this, that did I share that your dreams most often occur during REM? But that would, in any case, they do. So most of the dreams that you have occur in this state because, again, your mind is trying to make sense of the symbols symbolically and emotionally, things that have happened throughout the day, okay? So when we consider dreams, how many of you, maybe by a show of hands or just verbally, how many of you have vivid dreams? That you feel like you remember your dreams at least?
Rarely.
Rarely. Okay, but you do, right?
Yeah, from time to time.
Okay. Okay. So when, how many? Let me ask. How many of you do not remember dreams? Let me ask that. That might be a shorter answer.
Man.
Yeah,
A lot of
don't?
times.
You don't?
Yeah.
Okay, okay. Some people don't. Actually, a very small percentage of people say that they don't remember them, and there could be different reasons for that. It could be that they are just not alert to having dreams, or maybe they're not going through these cycles in a way that many other people do. So, in order, and that's not to say that you're not getting REM sleep. Chances are you probably are at some level. But for some reason, this jump between, because when we come out of our sleep, we go back into N3, non-REM 3 sleep, right? Actually, I think, I think my slide froze again. Darn it. Sorry about
It's
that.
for me, it's still on brain activity during sleep.
Yeah, it is.
Excuse me, Professor.
Yep, go ahead.
Do we dream each night?
If you get REM sleep, now calling something a dream is very, it's kind of a loose term. Yes, we all dream. We have activity going on within REM that helps us to package things nicely into our long-term memory in our hippocampus, right? What tends to happen though is whether or not we'll call it a dream if we can remember it. And if we remember it, then we can kind of express or articulate the flow of things happening as we recall them. But not everybody does that. And there are a lot of theories as to why we dream, and there are even more theories as to why we don't. But one of them could be that you just, you're just not worried about the dreams. They just kind of happen. You enter a state of relaxation. You definitely go into REM sleep, but for some reason, some people just don't extrapolate information from their dreams and talk about it in their active memory. So does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. But for those of us that do remember them, sometimes they're kind of cool. Sometimes they're kind of frightening, right? I'm sure many of you that have had dreams, you probably remember bad ones. And again, that's because the more vivid, or the more that we roll them over repeatedly in our brains, in our minds, the more vivid they seem to be. And we'll experience that, especially if something has been traumatic, because we're still trying to process that as we sleep. Okay. So there are a couple, as I expressed, there are a couple reasons, a couple theories as to why we dream. And maybe some of you have particular reasons why you think you dream. What are some reasons you feel you might have dreams? Let me ask that. Let's hear some popular, some of your theories.
Well, maybe you have dreams because like you want to feel something or imagine something that's happening to you, or like take you near or somewhere you haven't seen before, like that, I guess.
Okay. So kind of wish fulfillment, right?
Yes.
Okay. So and there are theorists that consider that. What are some other reasons you feel you might have dreams?
I think we have dreams because in the night when we are sleeping, it is our unconscious that is working. So.
Okay. And that's activation synthesis, or activation information theory. I'll talk about that here shortly. Okay, so things that are going on around you, your brain is trying to make sense of that, right?
Yeah.
Nice.
Most often, if I have an event that's coming up during the night, I think I will have a dream how I'm gonna, manage this thing, the event, how I'm gonna show up, how something like that will happen during the night. And sometimes I keep waking up, or my night will be disturbed all night.
Okay, okay. So fear, well, fear and anxiety might be
Yeah.
a reason why we dream as well, right? I've heard, and I don't know, maybe you feel this way and you haven't voiced your opinion yet, but some people think that it's like a precognitive, like foreseeing the future or seeing at another point in the timeline. Okay, there are many theories as to why we dream, and I'm not here to say what's wrong or what's right. I'm letting you know what we use in psychology. And precognitive is not one of those things. We don't look at that as a model, because it's not very scientific. We do have a lot of science that shows that people that experience something traumatizing or very activating during the day will likely have some kind of dream reflecting that in symbolic ways that night or in subsequent nights. So we do know that there is a correlation between that. We do know that somebody that is experiencing anxiety or anticipation of something fearful or potentially damaging the next day will dream the night before because of the worries and anxiety, right? The fear. So we do know that. We do know we haven't really, and we didn't get into biases and I'm trying to think of the word. It's eluded me. But we do hear of people having dreams of a catastrophe happening, just something totally happenstance, and then it occurs, right? But the correlation is very, very, very small. But when somebody does express that they've had that dream and something does happen, right, that kind of confirmed confirmation bias. That's what it was. Confirmation bias is that now we feel like we have some kind of special ability. And again, I'm not here to discredit that or add any kind of substance to that, but what we look at psychology is fear and anxiety. We look at wish fulfillment, so things that we want to happen seem to be it. And I think it was.
All right, can you just tell me again what the other theory was? Activation what?
Activation synthesis theory. Okay, and what that is, activation synthesis tells us or describes. I think I actually might have a slide on here. Yes. Okay, let me share this with you. I wish there was just a button I can just click and this comes up. All right, so your activation synthesis or activation information, either one, occurs when you remember, if you remember, we talked about the brain. We have the inner brain, which is more of and the hindbrain, which is more of our animal instincts, right? Our survival. We thrive. It tells us when to sleep, when to eat, when to procreate, right? When to relax, when to activate and get into fight or flight. This all happens in our lower brain. Our memories are stored here. Our basic functions, such as experiencing pain and sight and smell, all happen in the lower brain. So what happens in activation information theory is, say that we are aroused throughout the day by something that scared us or something that we want. Either way, an emotion or some kind of memory was formed that is still activating areas of our brain. Now, when we go to sleep, our cerebral cortex, let me change my color here, cerebral cortex, the outer brain, that tends to show less activity as we go through N1, N2, and N3 stages of sleep. But when we get into REM sleep, it starts activating very similarly to like when we are awake. So what happens when we have our inner brain still activated from something that some emotion that we experience throughout the day, and then our brain becomes activated? Our brain wants to make sense of why we're experiencing that, because we are constantly talking back and forth between our inner brain and outer brain, our cerebral cortex. So when that happens, when that occurs, we're then, according to information activation or activation information model, we're then our mind is acting like it's awake and trying to make sense of why it is we're fearing. And again, trying to store information into our long-term memory from our cerebral cortex. Okay. Does that make sense? Did I lose anybody on that one?
Yes.
I think so. I think it makes.
What's that?
I had said I think it makes sense.
Okay, okay. And again, and you're going to hear me say this throughout the course, there's not one explanation. This is not a hard science. We cannot put little electrodes in our brain and say, this is for sure what is happening, because we don't know. We're not sure. So all we can do is really operate off of theories and experiments and what we see through observation of others. Okay. All right. So let's see. I'm trying to think what else we can. I want to talk about altered states, particularly with hypnosis and drugs, but I think we're going to put a pin in that until Wednesday, okay? All right, so I'll tell you what, let me stop sharing here. Let's do a quick activity, all right? So, and this has more to do with dreams, and I'm gonna give you a little bit of background before we get into that. So, Sigmund Freud, which you probably have heard of, I think we talked about him in chapter 1. We're going to talk about him again because he really helped us understand what the subconscious versus the conscious really means to us. Okay, and he theorized that what we show on the surface of us, and I'll give you a nice little diagram later, what we show on the surface of us is really a very small part of what's really going on underneath and deep within our brains and within our minds and our feelings based on experiences of our past, right? So he really theorized, put a lot of theories into why we dream, and he called them the window to our subconscious, because on the surface, remember we were talking about that ticker at the bottom of our screen that's constantly flowing and constantly streaming. Sometimes we're paying attention to that, sometimes we're not, right? Most often times I'm not looking at that because I'm looking at what's going on in front of me. So that ticker is constantly going, and that would be an indication, that would be analogous to what we have going below our surface sometimes, okay? So that's what one of Freud's biggest contributions was understanding our subconscious, and in relation to dreams, how we can look at those dreams to symbolically say what we might have going on in our surface, at our what we're presenting to others. So with that, what I'd like you to do is I'm going to break you off into maybe groups of 3 and come up with like a couple examples, maybe from your own experiences of dreams that you've had, and give me what you think like in terms of symbols, because they're not always what we see is what we get, right? In fact, they're very symbolic. But what we have is what Freud called the manifest versus the content. Okay, so the content is what we see in our dreams. So for example, if I have a feeling that if I have a dream that I fell out of an airplane and I'm falling, all right, that is, again, my inner brain somehow activated saying, I feel like something's happening and I don't have control over that. And that might be manifested from something that I feel like I failed earlier that day or in my life, something that came up and activated my brain, and now I feel like I'm falling. So you kind of see how that works. You have content, which is the actual thing. So write that down. You have content, which is what you actually dream, and then manifestation, which is what it might have come from. So come up with 3 examples within your group of maybe dreams that you've had or dreams that you've heard, and see if we can come up with a list of content versus manifestation. Does that make sense?
What was that word again after content?
Manifestation.
Manifestation, okay.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to break you off into groups just for maybe about 5 minutes, and then we'll reconvene here in just a little bit. All right, give everybody a couple more minutes to come back here.
Oh boy.
All right. I think we got everybody back. Great. All right. So before we get going with our list here, I do want to apologize. First of all, I had, and I'll bring this up here on my screen. I kind of misled you on what those terms were. So if you're taking notes, so content is the actual term that we use for what's in the dream. And we look at that as manifest content versus latent. And when we talk more about Freud, he talks a lot about latency, because what is latency is what really translates or transposes. So for example, if we have had a negative interaction with somebody, our defenses, we might have a latency in our defense. So we might not be as trusting with other people. So it's manifest content. Manifest content versus latency. So manifest is the actual feeling that we're experiencing, and latency is how it translates. Okay, so I apologize for that. So what did you come up with? What were some dream contents that you had that that you care to share or that you've heard of?
I'll go.
Go ahead.
So I'll go. What I talked about in the group is like what we dreamt about like one time and what we constantly had. For me, it personally referred back to a big passion I have in my life, and a big passion in my life is news. Like, that's what I want to be. I want to be a news correspondent.
Okay.
And I've been doing it for a while now. I do my own news show on YouTube. I've done it through high school. And when I was in 8th grade, when I was 8 years old, my idol was Matt Lauer at NBC. And then, so he was my idol for 10 years, but then, and now 3 years ago, this November will mark 3 years, he was terminated from the network for sexual misconduct. So then, of course, since he was my idol, inspired me to do that, of course, like when that happened, like I was crushed. So then, like, I kept having these dreams, like when I'm on the news and like I'm thinking this, like that could be me, that could be me. And then I've also like dreamt about him, like knowing now he's not doing anything anymore. And like, of course I had this constant worry, and it still could happen too, that he's going to get in this like deep, dark depression and do something really bad.
Okay. So how did that translate into your dreams? What dream content did you have?
Well, I dreamt that like that's like my like big goal was to make it to NBC News, and I know I have it in me. I know I can do it. So of course I always imagined myself like when I watched him on the news being in his position at that desk on the show. All right. So I think like that's what Okay.
So being a famous news anchor was the dream that you had.
Yeah, and then also like with people in that position, like when they have a fall from grace, it's so public, like everybody knows it. Yeah. And that is extremely hard to go through.
Yeah, especially if you idolize that person. Absolutely. Okay, good example. All right, how about somebody else? What other manifest versus latency content did you have? You can either start with the dream that you had and then tell me what you think it meant, or maybe like Mitch did, you talk about what your desire or fear is and then how that translated into dreams.
Okay, I'll go. So when I was pregnant with my first child, I used to have a reoccurring dream that my teeth would fall out.
Okay.
And I believe that was because of my fears of becoming a new mom. I was terrified.
Teeth falling out. This is a very popular dream, by the way. And maybe some of you can relate to this, but so Sigmund Freud wrote a book, and I've read this multiple times, and it's a really interesting book, but take it tongue in cheek if you do read it. It's called The Manifestation of Dreams. And what he talks about very similar things like flying or falling or teeth falling out. So you felt that it had to do with being a new mother, right?
Yes.
It usually comes from something very similar to what you described. Judgment. I always spelled judgment incorrectly. Judgment. So usually teeth falling out relates to, we feel like we're experiencing judgment that day. Okay, so probably another fear manifestation, right? Good example. All right. Anybody else? Let's do maybe 2 more here.
Oh, Professor, I was telling in my group that recently I had a ticket, so I have to go to court to file the ticket. And before the court date, like 2 days before, I dream about show up late in the court.
Okay, so showing up late in the court, right?
Yeah.
Now, if we look at showing late for court, if we look at, hopefully this is, okay, good, it's showing up late for court. That, and if you think about our mind activation, that is what? Is that a fear or a wish, would you say?
Me, it was a fear.
It's a fear, right?
Yeah.
So like 2 days before, you're thinking about that fine, and you're probably somebody that really wants to not get into trouble, right? So you're anybody that has this fear probably shows up on time, probably pays their bills, and that would manifest as into latency as a fear of not showing for court or not showing for something or being late. Yeah, absolutely. Good example. All right. How about one more?
So, I'm bad at remembering dreams, but there was this one dream that like I remembered for years about getting like attacked by a shark in my house. Like there was just a pool in my house. I didn't know what it meant, but when we talked about it, like there was probably something going on like inside of my house that I was worried about.
Okay. So worry within house.
In fact, I can relate to that because a couple times, in fact, more recently, at night, my mom forgot to shut the front door a couple times, and I came up from the basement, and I could feel a draft, and I'm like this, why is it so cold in here?
Yeah.
And I see that the front door's open, so I immediately go over and shut it. But now I have this worry that like this, there could be foxes, skunks, mice, coyotes in here.
Yeah. So these ones are really cool because it shows predator. It feels like something might be after us, and that might come from insecurity of something like you said that had happened. Maybe you heard about break-ins in the news or something, and that affected you because you might have worried. That's another fear one, right? So you kind of see, and I wish I could go through everybody's examples here. We just don't have that kind of time, unfortunately. But as you can see, what we fear and what we wish and what we experience can really turn into some of these latency dreams, and which is what Freud talked about. And if any of you like a good reading, highly recommend checking that out by Sigmund Freud. And it just and there are plenty of other books out there that have similar quality or similar properties to it. But checking it out, and it's kind of fun to have. And one of the things I work with my clients are anybody that experiences any kind of trauma and PTSD, and they go through and at night, and some of them fear actually having nightmares at night or night terrors. So part of the work that I do with them is help them to relate to that and respect those dreams, because those dreams really do tell us what's going on up here. And once we get what's going on up here out in the open, processing becomes so much easier. So just something for you to take with you. If any of you have had nightmares, or if you've encountered nightmares, just being aware that it's like that news ticker at the bottom, that it's just a constant stream of information, of feelings and symbols that we all have. And being aware of that is okay, but not letting that control the person. That's what we try and do in therapy, is not let those obsessions and those fixations and negative thoughts affect the bigger picture of things. Okay. Does that make sense? All right. All right. Well, thank you so much for those of you who shared today. Of course, I love when people bring their personal experiences to the table, because, you know, while this is not group therapy, this is a psychology class. This is something that we generally all share together, these experiences. So it's fun to kind of relate what we get in the book, because the books, I'll admit, the book is not the most energetic book out there, but when we relate these personal experiences to what we get in the book, I think learning occurs at a much deeper level. But all right, so I'm going to hang around a little bit longer to answer any questions. Are there any questions about the assignment that y'all have? Okay, go ahead.
So I went to check on my group project to see which group I'm supposed to be in, and there's nothing else there. It just says group project D.
Oh, okay, so probably nobody posted, and you are in VO5, correct? Who was that was? Alexandra, right?
Alexandra.
Okay, so you went into group project under content, right? And I'm not, okay, so I'm seeing, Alexandra, are you in D2L?
Yeah.
Okay, let me share my screen with you here, so with all of you. So when you go into content, group project discussion, you see group B there, correct?
I see group D.
You see group D. Oh.
D as in David.
Interesting. Okay. And when you click on that, what happens?
It opens the page, but it just says start new thread or something. It has no other content.
Okay. So, and you're in virtual, or, oh no, you're in RO8. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I have two different classes that meet me in here. So, okay, let me go into the right one. That'll help. So group discussions, group D. Okay. All right, I'm not seeing any threads in there, so that's part of it. I'm
in group B and I'm seeing the same problem.
Okay. So if you're in group B, go ahead. Who was that?
It was Richard.
Richard, go ahead and post a test thread in there, because I'm not seeing anybody has even in B or D that they've done anything in there yet. And for my other class, I had put the group members' names. Okay, Richard, yours came up. So the reason you're not seeing anything in there, Alexandra, is because nobody has posted anything. So okay. It's going to take, you all know what group you're in, correct?
No, I don't think I know.
Okay. Yeah, and I did, for some reason, it didn't show up on here. So my other class, it shows a list of people that are in those groups, and I don't know why. Let me go somewhere else and look at this. All right.
So I just put my name up to see if anything comes out.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'm seeing, if you're posting now, I'm seeing that. So I'm going to transpose all of your names into those groups, so that way you can see who else is in that group. I apologize. I thought I had done that. Did that for my other classes. For some reason, that didn't happen with this class. So, but anyway, if you want to know what group you're in, just go into content, group project discussion, and it'll tell you what group you have available, and that's the group you're in. And I'll work on that today, getting the list of who's in that for that project. Okay.
Now, what's the
and then you said
the project?
Okay. Go ahead, Richard, since you started.
I'm sorry. I was just asking, what's the criteria for the project then? Is there like a syllabus that we can look up for?
Yep. If you go into week 4, I unlocked week 4 assessments. It's going to tell you, it says, I got to fix that. It says final project due week 7 or 8. That's incorrect. It's actually week 15 for this class. Anyway, just go through that assessment group project 2. All you're doing for this is talking about how you plan on communicating with each other. All right. There are 5 areas that you're going to need to talk about, and I just need 1 submission from each group, not all group members, just each group. So if you're in group A and you have 5 people, pick somebody that's going to submit this document. Okay. But if you look at it, let me share my screen just so we're all on the same page. So if you look at it, it's saying how well, just a quick little write-up, nothing fancy. How well does the group plan on collaborating and communicating? Is it going to be via telephone or telephonically, email, Zoom, Google Docs, whatever you choose, whatever you think is going to be the best for everybody. You may have time restrictions. How do you plan on overcoming those? So many of you are working or have multiple classes that you're taking. How are you going to overcome those? 3, if your group has decided on division of labor, like is somebody going to do the presentation? Is somebody going to handle the literature review? Whatever. Talk about that a little bit here, and then decide on a preliminary topic. I'm not asking for anything solid now, and it may change, but the idea here is to get you to start generating ideas as a group. And again, I'm less focused on the quality of work. I do want a quality product, but I'm more interested to see how you communicate and how you collaborate and work and start gelling as a group to produce a final product. Okay, so that's the goal here. Keep that in mind. All right. But the final project here, again, disregard where it says week 7 and 8. I'm going to change that to week 15. This is for one of my shorter classes that I carried over. But this is going to be the project that you're going to be doing. Now, it is going to be 8 to 12 pages of main text. That's not a lot, especially if you have 5 of you working on that. That's going to be about 2, maybe 3 pages each of double space, 12-point font. That's not hard to do, okay? And then piecing it together, and then finally, making sure you have the abstract, the title page, whatever. And then the final presentation will be our final week that all of you can, you can either share presentations. I've had some students just go through the entire group, and somebody will take different portions, or I've had some students where they just have one presenting. It's up to you, however you want to decide to do that, okay? All right, any questions?
If you want to know what group you're in and who's in your group, you can go to where it says groups, the tab, and if you click on it, it'll bring up like everybody that's in your group. Yep,
I do have that. Thank you for pointing that out. I do have that listed there, but I don't have that listed in the discussion, which I meant to do. So I'll take care of that today. So it's in both places and you can both see it. All right. Any other questions? All right. Well, I thank all of you for your time and your patience and your participation today. Just out of curiosity, so I'm thinking of course, I like to do a little bit of extra credit for certain things. So for example, some of you may have not gotten our first discussion in, or may have missed an assignment or something.
That's me.
In those cases, if extra credit opportunities come along, I like to throw them out there. Is anybody interested, like if I do a movie night, like 7 o'clock on certain nights, and it's not going to be every week or anything like that, but how many of you would possibly be interested in meeting live for like a movie night, for psychology movie night or something? Okay. All right. All right, so quite a few of you. All right, so let me think about how that's going to work. I think I have a way to do that on Zoom. I used to do this with my live classes and Meet, but unfortunately we can't do that due to social distancing. But let me think about how I'm going to do that, and I'll let you know. Okay.
Yeah.
But thank you for letting me know who would be interested.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. If nothing else, have a great rest of your day, and I will see all of you here on Wednesday.
Yeah. Oh, Professor, I have a question.
Oh, okay.
Have a good day.
Thank you. You too. Hold on a second, Pierre. Let everybody.